Hello, this is Danny McDougall. Recently, I have finished my PhD research, and I've learned a lot about the way our bodies relate to space around us. And so today I'm going to take a small bit from that and talk with you about how I've used that information to impact the way I teach online. When you or I think of the term space, what do we imagine? Maybe we think about a globe with longitudes and latitudes, and where they intersect is a place we can plant a flag in a spot. And we think about a physical space on a map, right? But more recently, researchers have taken a more social turn in terms of the idea of space, that space is social as well. And we have the physical part of space, how it's conceived, our roads, our buildings, those kinds of things, the labels we have and the ways that we count and number things. But also, there's the way that our body reacts to space and interacts with space through our senses and the way that we experience space. And then, in turn, the way that we respond with space, have a dialogue with space. So there's the physical part of space and also the senses and how we experience space. And both of those combine together within us to give a space its meaning. These three things can't really be separated, they're combined in a triad. This is an important concept, this idea of how our body relates to space. And we have a diversity of bodies, right? Which means our experiences of space are diverse as well. Our social experiences with space and also our physical experiences with space. There's been a growing body of research around the conceptualization of deaf space here mashed together by Bauman. He focuses on the architectural or the physical parts of space and how deaf people arrange a space, a deaf school, deaf homes, a variety of different deaf places and what these places look like. For example, how things are lit, how walls are constructed, and how seating is arranged, for example. And this is an expanding idea of deaf space that also includes the way that we socially interact with space and how those two come together to give meaning to deaf space. Now, if we imagine a hearing classrooms tend to be based on an experience where there's a dual channel input. One channel is visual, and at the same time, we're also listening. There's a auditory channel, and there's an assumption that when people sit in classes in rows, with the teacher standing in the front, and the teacher can be writing on a board and providing some information. They don't even have to stay near the board. They can move. The students who are hearing can look up at the board or look down at a book. They can look all around. So they have a visual input and an auditory input channel at the same time. Now, as an alternative to this dual channel auditory visual input, what if we got rid of the audio channel and it was a dual visible or visual input? Maybe one visual input is taking in the information that's the educational material, and the other visual input is language, and they're happening in parallel. And so you're seeing the visual information, then the other visual information. Maybe a teacher is standing off to the side of the board, or even an interpreter who sometimes stand even farther away. This means we can't really sit in rows, can we? Often, deaf classrooms look differently. For example, this picture is the SLS lab. This is the design many years ago in 2012. We followed that concept of deaf space. We wanted tables that could be moved, and we wanted to be able to sit in a semicircle so we could see each other. Now, here we have an example of photo from American School for the Deaf, ASD. And this is a great example of modular seating that can be moved, and the students can see one another as they're in class. They can all see the entire room. And they can also see the teacher all at the same time. They can see the teacher, and they can also see the board behind the teacher. It's a great improvement, even though there is some space. They can all see the teacher and the board at the same time. Now, Mather explains that there is a kind of a tendency for the working memory models, the models of working memory. And there's an assumption that there's these three things in working memory. One is that there are dual channels, one visual, one auditory, and they're working at the same time. The next assumption is that each one of these channels has a limited capacity. They can't go on forever. They can only hold so much information. And so the third assumption is that we improve the retention of information by practicing or rehearsing the auditory information in our brains. It helps to retain that information. So these three things are assumptions in working memory models. Now, imagine if we dropped the auditory channel and we had two visual channels. It would create a split attention condition. Mentally split, that is. First, there's the visual channel that takes in the writing on the board and other educational information. But there's also a second visual channel that takes in language. Now, this is research related to the hearing experience when they have two visual channels. It increases cognitive effort, it reduces attention, and it reduces learning. So that experience of dual visual channels mimics, in a way, a deaf experience. Now, for the next couple of slides, I'm going to follow Mather and her explanation of this visual phenomenon, and I'll go away for a moment. First, I showed the photo with a variety of shapes. And then that was taken away, and I displayed a list of the labels. And these were presented separately. That's the most taxing of the examples that we'll have. The second requires a little less effort. Now, in this example, the information is provided at the same time, the photo and the list, side by side, but they are still separated, which means there is a ping pong effect. There's still cognitive effort put in that effort of going back and forth. Now, here's a third example. In this example, the information is integrated. The picture of the shapes also has the labels superimposed on top. This third example reduces the cognitive effort required to process the information because you can see the shape and the label at the same time. Mather looked at this condition and she applied it to a deaf classroom where students were watching the teacher as she taught a lesson. There was information on the projected information was on the wall while the teacher was signing separately, and the students had to look back and forth. Now, with the information more integrated, This example shows the same projection, but with the teacher standing in front of the projection and also signing on top. So there is this multi-layered information all within the same visual field. This brings us to interpreters that you might see standing very far apart from a presenter. In this picture, we have an example of a teacher standing in one area with the projected information, and hearing people have, even though they can hear, they have this condition of having to look back and forth. But part of the thing that's important is there is co-speech gesture and information that's happening on the teacher. And so now with a deaf person, you have the interpreter involved, and they have to take in all three of these points of reference visually. It's a lot of cognitive effort to integrate all of this information. The interpreter is aware of this, and they're trying to take aspects of the way that hearing and deaf people manage space production and blend them together in their own way. Now, with that idea in mind about overlapping information, how can we bring this into our classroom? From here on, I'm going to show you two examples. One is from with the use of Zoom, and the other is OBS. Zoom is more simple, while using OBS is a bit more complicated. Here we are in Zoom. It's a bit more simple to attempt this. I have a green screen, which isn't required, but it helps a great deal. First, you're required to upload your PowerPoint deck. Each PowerPoint slide will become an image. There will be no motion, so that if your PowerPoint requires fancy transitions and things like that, you can't use the Zoom technique. First, we start with sharing the screen, and we upload the PowerPoint in a snap. You'll notice that the brain image is not spinning anymore because now it's a static picture. I'm just sort of plopped in the center, but I can adjust the size if I'd like. And you'll notice that there's one window where you see me and the information integrated, and there's a separate smaller window. If you want to stop the integration of the content, you can do that. And you can bring the integration back together. To scroll through the slides, you do this. You'll notice that sometimes the green screen is okay, but sometimes it's not wonderful. Now, I'll show you OBS next. Now we are in OBS, and you can see three windows that I'm working with. The first that we'll look at is the OBS software. It's a free download. You'll notice several columns. The one on your far left is labeled scenes, and that means any arrangement that I want for the classroom. Maybe slides with myself in a frame in front, maybe even with some text in front. I can set all of that up beforehand, and then later during class, I can simply click on each label to transfer from effect to effect. It saves a great deal of time and provides flexibility in class. Next to that column is a list of sources in each scene. Cameras, slides, sound sources, video sources. A whole variety of sources can be mixed together at one time. Control of these is very simple. Now, you might wonder, how do I get all of that from OBS into Zoom? Well, Zoom has a source list of cameras. Maybe you have one. I've added OBS, and so I have another one. I've called mine NDI. Now, you can see my green screen at the present moment because you're looking through my GoPro directly. Now I'm going to transfer to NDI as my source. And so now all of the content from OBS is streaming in my Zoom window. I don't need to share anymore. If I want to share a PowerPoint or video or anything, I can do it through OBS. I can control the PowerPoint using the third window on my desktop. I'm clicking through. It's simple. Now, OBS does have a bit of a heavy learning curve. It's more advanced technology than Zoom, but you can also see that it provides a lot of flexibility for layering multi levels of content. Also, you can adjust the green screen to improve the quality of those results as well. Lastly, when I teach sign language, I think, and also interpreting, video becomes an important part of our lessons. And with OBS, you can control the bit rate that you're streaming from, and you can adjust that to make it more dependable for your viewers. So far in class, I've had videos as long as 15 minutes long, streamed those to a group of students and had no problems. That's a huge benefit. Video in OBS is something, an object that you can use like a slide. I'll show that to you next. So here I'm showing a video that I've pulled into OBS and also added me, and then also some text. Now I can control the video in OBS, and I can also show it in Zoom. This allows me to show a video clip while also commenting on it, while stopping occasionally, and all through OBS. It doesn't matter whether your audience is hearing or deaf. Integrating visual information will improve your audience's attention, memory, and learning. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and that from now on when you see an interpreter standing way off to the side or captions that are very small at the bottom of a screen, you might think, how can we improve this situation? Thanks for watching.